Hello and welcome to the Fervent 4. Did you know that only 4% of businesses ever cross the annual $1 million revenue mark? Hello, I'm Zack Miller, author of Anomaly. With me today, I have my co-host Tim Ryan, lead man at StartWheel.org. Thank you so much for joining us. The Fervent 4 is a weekly show each and every Thursday at 11 a.m. dedicated to sharing insights into growing a world-class business no matter the climate. Today, we are joined by Kala Fleming, and we are so delighted to be here with you. Hello.
Hi, guys.
Hello,
Thank you
hello.
for having me.
Absolutely. Okay, so you have like a legit TED Talk, not a TEDx talk. Like it's a legit TED Talk. Like, was I watching the right thing? Is it a TEDx? Is it a real TED Talk? Like what?
It's a legit TED Talk. So during my IBM days, um, there there was a period of time where there's a bit of a partnership between the TED organization and IBM, and so it's like for tech storytelling. And so there was sort of this process where, for the interesting projects across the company, we had just a period of time where, if we were selected, we would then go through that whole vetting process. So for what you see as a final TED Talk, it took, I don't know, at 6 months of prep
Wow.
to actually deliver that whole thing.
Yeah, it was fancy. I mean, I think I saw that just from like your name website. I can't remember where I saw it, but I was like, oh, most people, are promoting that they did a TEDx talk, and I'm like, okay, that's good, And then I was like, hold on a second, this is not a TEDx talk. This is like a legit thing. Like, so mad kudos to you for that. That's exciting. I know the process can be quite. I'll use the word painful just to get there. Are you someone who speaks on stage? Was that a scary thing? Is that the biggest crowd you've ever been in? Like, how did that whole thing of just like the performance aspect of it go?
Yeah, really good question. So, as a researcher, scientist who tends to be, and I guess, well, more in my former life, but I tended to be the person who had to explain things at conferences, or to maybe business groups. But I do think as I'm now thinking back, because no one has ever asked, I think that maybe might be the largest in-person audience, though, that I had to deliver to. So because I had a familiarity with presenting and tended to do a decently good job, the idea of being on stage itself, um, you know, I wasn't afraid of that. I didn't have nerves around that. Although I think every time I do go out and have a conversation in a new context or setting, there's some kind of nerves that come in. But the thought and the prospect of doing that, I was kind of jazzed about it. And then, like I said, for that prep process, you kind of had to, for the messages, even though I kind of had a sense, given what we were working on, I had a sense of what I wanted to talk about. But that first script got torn up, I don't know how many different times. And then, I think once we got to like a month or two before, then the goal was to know it cold, like fully cold.
Wow. So was
And
this something you volunteered for, or were you
well,
selected?
it was an honor. Like it was a very selective process to be included, as a part of that. And so yeah, it was, I had a project that was, it really showcased a lot of things about the potential for the Internet of Things in emerging markets. And I guess just for context, at that point, for my journey with IBM, I was brought in as a domain expert for water. And, at that point in time, there were questions about, there's all of this stuff going on globally with AI. But they were asking the question, IBM research was, well, how can AI and other emerging technologies be useful for emerging markets, and in particular, a place like Africa? And so I was, like employee number 4 or something with a new research lab that got set up there. And so this TED Talk was maybe 2 years after that. And so it was kind of this crowning achievement of being able to at least have identified some interesting things that we were prototyping with different clients, And so for a lot of my work, because this is now looking at IoT and water innovations, and thinking about how we ultimately could use something like the Internet of Things and sensors to increase how water was flowing. I worked with, my customers, or who I engage with were like the World Banks and the USAIDs of the world. Anyway, so by the time that this came around and they were looking for projects to highlight, this was one of the examples of just a successful partnership. A successful partnership. And so it was an honor to be, selected and be a part of all of that.
So just for more context, how long was that TED Talk for our audience members can?
It was,
yeah, it's short. Like the actual on stage. Do you mean?
Yeah.
8 minutes. I don't think we even got to 10 because it was.
I remember looking at it being like, this is shorter, or even as I was watching. Yeah.
No.
But the point that I'm trying to make for the people listening, especially with all the work that we do to try to help people with their pitch, you work 6 months on 8 minutes.
Yes, or less. Yeah.
And so many founders that we run into are like, oh, I can do a pitch. I don't even need to practice. I'll just get up on a stage and totally do an impromptu and just knock this thing out. And here you're telling us that you work 6 months on 8 minutes.
Yeah.
One of the most popular TED Talks is like 2.5 minutes. And it's the one where the guy has to start dancing on the field, and then he needed a follower. And then the follower was the most important. Someone had to start it. Then someone had to follow him. And then because they were dancing on this field and this some random rave, then hundreds flock, and just all these randoms, dancing. And it was something about building community in that kind of case. But it's like 2.5 minutes long. And I don't know, multi-million views on something on Ted's YouTube channel or something like that. So it's pretty impressive stuff. I'm interested. We're going to get to the Frontline Gig stuff, but I'm interested in just how a TED Talk and how working for a big company, being employee number 4 or 5, like you said, at something like that, really prepared you to go out on your own and become an entrepreneur. Because I think a lot of times people don't take advantage of the situations that they're in and really leverage and capitalize that stuff to then start their own thing. It sounds like you've done a really good job of understanding that situation and then having a nice little parallel into this. But what do you think about how those things have prepared you to get on your own and do your own thing?
I really like the way that you framed that. So one of the things with my IBM journey, before that, by training, I am a civil and environmental engineer, and I do have a minor in computer science. But a lot of my work before then had been, looking at water systems, water quality, and more of the typical civil engineering, environmental engineering fare. And so with the IBM journey, then I got to take that background and interest and think about, well, how does this all work if I put a digital tech layer on it? And so there's all of these huge learning curves around just understanding how do you build software, and so but how do you build software but make it relevant to deliver value to an end user. So as far as preparation for, working in the startup world, I got a perspective or a vantage point around like what was possible and ultimately how, and ideas for how I might use technology to further the interests and the ambitions that I had around, maybe you can call it social impact, but a lot of my work tends to be like that. As I think that was the biggest piece. And I don't know if you were going to ask it next, but there are now, I think, a lot of things that are not similar. And so, like, one of the things that I think about the most, when as a truly being in the startup world, I remember that, for the lab in Kenya, it was really new. So it was in many ways like a startup. because, there's just so many things that you had to figure out, but it was a very well-funded startup. And so that kind of makes a difference in terms of,
That was IBM Kenya. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. So yeah, IBM Research Africa, and maybe just for a little bit more context. So a lot of big tech companies, the way that you end up staying ahead is that you have a research group that's helping you think about what's next. So today, when I look at the landscape of technologies for what's happening, whether it's with drones or we've gotten with AI or IT, a lot of things we were talking about 6 years ago, 7 years ago. But it's just that now, in terms of maybe being able to connect with the market in a particular kind of way, just because there's more readiness, more maturity, just different adoption, things have changed, then you actually really see it come to life. But the strategy for staying ahead, if you're in tech, is that you've got this group of folks who are, they've got the freedom to experiment and try things and fail and try again to really line up, where might be, the next opportunity.
Are you stuck at your home office, socially distanced coffee shop, or your fancy all bricked out corner office, wondering why no one can see your business and sales are all over the place? Sounds like you need a pro. That's why I developed the Anomaly Academy. Insert clever copy here. Oh, I guess I was supposed to put something else there. Oops. You can grab access to the Anomaly Academy now at zackmillersays.com/Anomaly Academy.